Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Camp Nowhere. Today, we are going to be going on a very different type of adventure from our last episode. Instead of doing an adventure where we go out, we're doing an adventure where we go in to our minds. That's just a really convoluted way of saying today, we're going to talk about books. I think that books are such an important part of my personal process in terms of inspiration, excitement for adventure and travel, expanding my knowledge of the world, all of which does ultimately kind of contribute to the greater body of my work. So today I kind of wanted to focus on some different books that have been very influential to me personally, and then kind of get into some books that are on the horizon. Today we're going to be covering three main different categories of books, and it's just because they kind of suit the nature of this podcast. So the first is going to be adventure and travel. The next category will be natural history and science. And then the last but not least, we're going to do a little bit of exploring through books in the category of personal development. So the way that this is going to be structured is I am going to share a couple of books that I felt were most impactful for me personally in each of these categories. I'll share a quick little synopsis, and then I will fill you in on why I felt like it was a really good book, why it was important, but obviously all while avoiding any potential spoilers. So don't worry. Additionally, I'm going to call out if I feel that there is any particular manner in which you should consume a specific book. So be it audiobook, hardcover, e-reader, what have you. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes certain books call for a specific format, so I will ensure that I call those out. And then at the end of each category, I'm going to rapid fire off some honorable mentions that I personally feel are not to be missed, but that we will not dive into in as much detail. All right, without further ado, let's talk books. First up is the category adventure and travel. The first book on my list is The Emerald Mile, the epic story and the fastest ride in history through the heart of the Grand Canyon by Kevin Fedarko. So a little synopsis on this book. It takes place in the spring of 1983 as a massive flooding event is happening along the length of the Colorado River, and it is threatening the most catastrophic dam failure in history. In the midst of this crisis, a small wooden dory named the Emerald Mile is about to launch into the Colorado River at the head of the Grand Canyon, just miles downstream from where the dam is failing. The goal was to set the all-time record of the fastest boat to travel the length of the Grand Canyon. I'll just go ahead and say it. I think that this is one of my favorite books that I have ever read, and I think it's my favorite book for a lot of different reasons. There is a sentimental aspect to this. My grandmother read this book and then gave me her personal copy. This was shortly after we hit the road, and I think that she had a really good sense of books that I really loved. And so I knew getting this recommendation from her that it was going to be a good one. But I think that I always love a true adventure story, but I'm also a really big fan of natural history. And this book does such a good job of bringing those two things together in one story. So each of the chapters are kind of bouncing back and forth between these people that are going out to do the speed run, obviously their history and how they came to be doing that. But then it's tracking that story along the grander history of the Grand Canyon. And so this goes all the way back to the early people who used and loved the Grand Canyon, the native people of the United States. And it kind of tracks it all the way through the Spanish conquistadors coming to North America, how this massive canyon was formed. But I just think it does an incredible job interweaving history with this tale of adventure and bravery. I found it to be gripping. I think that Kevin Fedarko is a great author, and I cannot recommend this one enough. Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by Caroline Alexander. The Endurance recounts one of the single greatest tales of survival in history. Sir Ernest Shackleton in 1914 through 1960 goes on an expedition to Antarctica. The expedition is Shackleton's third to the area, and he's going in pursuit of the last unclaimed prize in the history of exploration on that continent. And it is to be the first person to cross the Antarctic continent on foot. Their ship, the Endurance, gets trapped in the ice and is crushed, leaving the crew stranded on the ice. And the book details 20 full months of their fight for survival. You know, I think that I often feel that I was maybe born in the wrong time. I feel like I'm just really drawn to stories of early exploration. I just think what an incredible time to be alive. Granted, to be a woman in that time, I definitely would have not been able to partake in any of these adventures. But I just feel like people were built differently back then. Just like crazy strong, crazy tenacity. And I feel that this is one of the single best tales of bravery and leadership I personally have ever come across. Literally, in this story, everything imaginable somehow goes wrong, but Shackleton is still able to keep his men moving and keep them pushing on despite truly every odd that is stacked against them. I think as a person who likes to challenge herself, and things obviously go wrong in those scenarios, and I just think it's incredibly inspiring to hear how Shackleton was able to not only stay positive, but to get his men moving from one location to the next throughout their story, throughout their adventure. It's just really quite possibly one of the most insane stories I have ever read. And the fact that it is true, I just think it makes it even more valuable of a resource to pull inspiration from. I mean, could you imagine literally living out on the ice for 20 months on the other side of the world after your ship has been crushed? Yeah, like try staying positive after something like that. Insane. Cannot recommend this book enough. And I'm just going to go ahead and stop saying that, because if I'm mentioning this book or any book in this episode, just know I cannot recommend it enough. Shadow Divers. The true adventure of two Americans who risked everything to solve one of the last mysteries of World War II, by Robert Kurson. Two passionate weekend wreck divers risk everything to solve a great historical mystery and make history themselves. In the fall of 1991, they found 230 feet below the surface in the frigid Atlantic waters 60 miles off the coast of New Jersey, an unidentified World War II German U-boat. Its ruined interior, with a macabre wasteland of metal, tangled wires, and human bones, all buried under decades of accumulated sediment. Okay, this book was given to me by my brother to read, another person who has a very good understanding for a type of book that I would love. We grew up diving together. I think that diving has always been a source of interest for my family at large. But I think that what is so interesting is that you can be a casual diver, but there is this entire other world of diving, and that is deep water diving. And this book is taking place at a time kind of at the forefront before unique oxygen mixtures were available to allow people to go to the depths that they are today. So these men were pioneers at deep water diving, and not only were they pioneers at doing it, but they were actually mixing their own oxygen and nitrox combos so they could do these dives. Then they go down to 230 feet and they find this unidentified German U-boat. I personally am not the largest World War II buff, but I came to understand through this book that every single boat that was involved in World War II from both the US and the German side, whether or not it sank, they know where it is. It is documented, what happened to it, what have you. But then they find this boat that is fully undocumented. And so these men are going to try to figure out what boat this was, how it got there, and why some other boat has clearly been misidentified. So I just think that this was such a gripping tale. I feel like as far as page turners are concerned, this one was one of those books for me. Could not put it down. I just thought it was so fascinating that these two normal guys are called to action and what they decide to do about it. I think that we all just like to think or hope that maybe if an adventure calls to us one day, that we will recognize it for what it is and we will do something about it. But I feel like this is a tale of two completely normal dudes who decided to do something when it was presented. If you find diving to be interesting, if you find wreck diving to be interesting, finding sunken treasure and artifacts, if you find any of that interesting, I think that this book is going to be a good one for you. Here are the honorable mentions for the adventure and travel category. The Puma Years, a memoir by Laura Coleman. Laura was in her early 20s, felt directionless, decided to go backpacking in Bolivia, and finds herself volunteering at a wildlife refuge and falls in love with a big cat, and it completely changes the direction of her life. Fantastic story. Into the Inferno, a photographer's journey through California's megafires and fallout by Stuart Pally. Stuart is a really good and dear friend of ours. He is a very talented photographer, and him being a friend of ours has really opened us up to the world of documenting fires and what a unique concept that is, to be a person who specializes in going out and documenting these incredibly devastating fires. I think that he has an incredible perspective on fire, on climate change, and I think his book is fantastic. Obviously, I can't recommend it enough. Okay, I'm sorry. This is going to turn into a drinking game if I keep saying that. A Walk in the Park, a true story of a spectacular misadventure in the Grand Canyon by Kevin Fedarko. Obviously, you recommend this name because he is the author of The Emerald Mile. This is his most recent book, and it documents him hiking the length of the Grand Canyon and documenting all of the people that the Grand Canyon is important to. Deep. Freediving, Renegade Science, and What the Ocean Tells Us About Ourselves by James Nestor. This is an outdoor journalist who discovers the world of freediving when sent there on an assignment, and it takes him on this bizarre journey into humans truly pushing themselves to the end, but also the science of breathing and our bodies in the water. Truly, truly fascinating. Also, you'll recognize his name. We're going to come back to him a little bit later. To Shake the Sleeping Self, a journey from Oregon to Patagonia and a quest for a life with no regret by Jedediah Jenkins. I think that this is a fantastic book for anybody who is looking to step out of their comfort zone and really push themselves. I think that Jedediah is on a very important trip to understand and come to some form of understanding his sexual identity and how that sits along with his Christian upbringing. Before we move on to the next category, I do want to just profess my love for this particular category. I just think that if I'm going to seek out a title, I feel like this is probably the category that I come to most. I just love finding inspiration in other people's bravery. You never know when life is going to ask you to step up and be brave, and I feel like to have this kind of inspiration squirreled away in my brain somewhere is kind of just like a good thing to have in the back pocket. I think it also fuels me to push my own personal boundaries and figure out what I am capable of. And for God's sakes, if Shackleton's men can survive out on the ice of the Antarctic, I can surely finish this hike. See what I mean? You get the picture. Natural History and Science. Finding the Mother Tree. Discovering the Wisdom of the Forest by Suzanne Simard. This book is a memoir detailing Suzanne's groundbreaking research that reveals that forests are complex, cooperative communities and not just collections of individual trees. Through personal stories and scientific evidence, she demonstrates how trees communicate and share resources through an underground fungal network with mother trees. Brought up in a logging family, she has a challenging journey to gain acceptance for her scientific findings, which contrasts the traditional view of forests being a competitive environment. I guess before I say anything about this book specifically, I find the category of scientific books to be very interesting. I think it's always even more interesting when you're hearing from the person who has found the scientific findings. So with Finding the Mother Tree, I think that what is so fascinating about this book is really interesting, incredible, and progressive science was being done that has found truly how intricate and detailed and complex communities of trees are, and how they have honestly a great deal of altruistic features to their personality types. They are giving, they work in communities. The science is absolutely fascinating. But then to also hear about her experience, she's coming up in a logging family and then is working in the logging industry as a scientist. And then she starts finding all of this information that is obviously greatly calling into question forestry practices. So obviously, that's not going to be received very well. This book is kind of tracking the research and her findings, but also tracking her own personal story. And I feel like it is a very beautiful and poetic way to share really incredible and cutting-edge science for trees, which are everywhere and all around us. So it's always really cool to get a better understanding for something that we live amongst. Other Minds: The Octopus, the Sea, and the Deep Origins of Consciousness by Peter Godfrey Smith. In Other Minds, philosopher and scuba diver Peter Godfrey Smith explores the evolution of consciousness by explaining the intelligence of octopus and other cephalopods. Blending scientific research and his own observations, he argues that the octopus represent a, quote, alien form of intelligence evolving separately entirely from vertebrates, and challenges human-centric ideas of the mind. This book was utterly fascinating. I think that this was my first foray into scientific philosophy, so philosophizing about some of the gaps in our knowledge base, specifically when speaking about the development of intelligence. And the way that he does this is he is looking at the development of intelligence in cephalopods. So that's your octopus, your cuttlefish, and things of that variety. I think that this book just really kind of takes our idea of intelligence and kind of flips it on its head, because the intelligence that exists within cephalopods is so incredibly different. It's why Peter Godfrey Smith refers to their intelligence as alien, because it might as well be. It is that different from how our intelligence has taken shape. So by challenging our human-centric idea of intelligence and looking at trying to understand cephalopods' intelligence is just fascinating. I definitely recommend listening to this book specifically rather than reading. This book is super information dense. It almost reads like a textbook. So for me personally, in order to get something that is so information dense, I find it's better for me to listen to a book of that variety so I can spend time pondering rather than keeping my place in a book. I found this information to be so fascinating that I did ultimately listen to this book twice. I just find the idea of the development of intelligence in two separate times on planet Earth and in two very different types of creatures, ourselves included, it's just fascinating. And I would say that my biggest personal takeaway was that the predecessor to intelligence is a sense of curiosity. So good. I'll leave you with that. The Feather Thief: Beauty, Obsession, and the Natural History Heist of the Century by Kirk Wallace Johnson. This book documents the theft of 299 rare bird skins from the British National Museum of History by flautist Edwin Riss to fuel his obsession with the Victorian-era salmon fly tying. That is a mouthful. Johnson, the author, investigates Riss' motive, the black market of rare feathers, and the cultural significance of fly tying, weaving these threads into a compelling narrative about the obsession, greed, and environmental impact. I think that this book exists at the intersection of so many of my personal favorite topics, which are true crime, nature, science, and history. I just found this book to be so beautifully written, again, bouncing back and forth between history, science, and then this crime that is ultimately taking place. I think it was beautifully written, and it was very difficult to put down. And I think that any time that you're reading a book that's difficult to put down, but it's about something that actually happened, I think that's a good book. So this 110% qualifies. Braiding Sweetgrass: Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This book weaves together Indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and a personal memoir that explores humanity's relationship with the natural world. As a botanist and member of the Potawatomi Nation, the author shares lessons about the interconnectedness and advocates for treating the earth as a generous home rather than a mere resource. I think that what is so fascinating about this book is it is at the cross-section of being a modern botanical scientific research while also sharing Native wisdom that has been passed down for generations within Native communities, much like the Potawatomi Nation that the author lives in. I found this fascinating because Native knowledge is from centuries of observational science, and I think that there is so much to be learned from that. And I think that this is one of the few times where the two schools of thought actually come together. I think that Robin is a gifted writer, and I did happen to listen to this book. She's also an incredible voice artist, so I personally thought that listening to this book was really lovely. But I think that she explores a lot of really important topics, like striking a better balance of living within nature and not living outside of it, and just treating the earth with more respect. Obviously, these are all ideas that I very firmly believe in myself, but I think to have a person with so much actual scientific knowledge kind of sharing their perspective and how those sit alongside the traditional teachings of Native communities. It was just a really beautiful book, really beautiful combination of multiple ideas and how they actually are very much saying the same things. Honorable mentions: Entangled Life: How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Futures by Merlin Sheldrick. This book explores the vast, essential, and often overlooked world of fungi, highlighting their interconnectedness with all living systems. This book is a great continued reading item that I would follow up with after reading The Mother Tree. Those two go very well hand in hand. The Great Animal Orchestra: Finding the Origins of Music in the World's Wild Places by Bernie Krause. Bernie Krause is one of the world's leading experts in natural sound, and he has spent his entire lifetime recording nature soundscapes and takes a good hard look at what can be learned about landscapes through their soundscapes. Definitely listen to this book. This is a really good one for listening to with headphones on. He plays a lot of his field recordings that he has collected over the years from all sorts of different fascinating ecosystems. You'll want to make sure you are in a place where you can hear those really well. I do not recommend an old car. Guess where I started listening to this book? The Dinosaur Artist by Paige Williams. I'll keep this one simple. If you liked The Feather Thief, you'll like this one. It's about dinosaurs, but same overall concept. We're already looking ahead at our travel plans for next year. Scary that next year is already so close, but thinking ahead to our next adventures is an incredibly exciting process. Next year, we're going big and checking off our #1 bucket list destination in the form of a group trip. In July 2026, we're heading to Namibia. Think climbing epic sand dunes, hiking to the iconic mud pans, and seeing wildlife on not one, not two, but 3 safaris. We'll be exploring ancient rock art, getting to know a new culture, and camping underneath the incredible desert skies. These trips are always life-changing, not just because of the places that we go, but because of the people that we share those experiences with. We'll handle all the logistics. All you need to do is show up ready for an incredible adventure. Space is limited, so check out all of the details via the link in the show notes. Grab your spot, and let's make Namibia unforgettable. Personal development. The Comfort Crisis. Embrace discomfort to reclaim your wild, happy, healthy self by Michael Ester. This book explores how modern comforts, while seemingly are beneficial, have eroded our physical and mental resilience, leading to increased stress, chronic illness, and a diminished sense of life satisfaction. So in putting this list together, I've kind of come to this realization that I gravitate towards books that are written by journalists who are working in the science space and then suddenly stumble on these ideas that takes their life in a completely different direction. This is another one of those books. I would put this in the category with Deep, as mentioned in the honorable mentions previously. I think that what is so fascinating about this book is a lot of the concepts that it covers, I feel like I have stumbled on in my own personal life, but didn't really have a way to articulate them. I spend a great deal of my time and my life gravitating towards things that do make me feel uncomfortable because I want to understand why that is. It's a trait that I'm very thankful for. I think that has brought a lot of incredible personal development into my life. But I think that this book is so great because it takes a really hard look at how we have developed as humans and how important discomfort is to our mental and physical well-being. And he kind of looks at different people through time and space to kind of articulate some of these ideas. But I feel like this one hit home for me, again, just because these are topics that I have kind of feel like I've brushed up against on my own. But I think that for anybody who loves to do, endurance racing, loves to have a challenge, I think that this book is very gratifying because I think it'll help you put words to why those are things that you gravitate towards. I am saying this because that's what it did for me. Breath. The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. This book explores how humans have lost the ability to breathe properly, which leads to various health issues like snoring and autoimmune diseases. Ultimately, this book takes all of those concepts into much greater depth, but you will recognize James Nestor's voice. Not his voice, but you'll recognize his name because I mentioned him in the honorable mentions category in Deep. So we're coming back to James Nestor quite a bit here. When reading Deep, he kind of starts to tap into this curiosity and this idea of the science behind breathing when he goes to this world freediving competition. It's this new concept to him. It's this new sport. But in that book, he's really kind of exploring specifically the sport of freediving. This is Deep I'm talking about. But then you can kind of see in the book, he's clearly picking up on a fascination for the science of breathing. So the book Breath is where that curiosity ultimately took him. I think it's quite fascinating. I don't think that many people are aware of like the evolutionary change that is happening in us now that does affect the way that we breathe and how that has changed over time, why that has changed over time, and what we can do now in this current time that we live in to be better at breathing. That sounds so ridiculous, but it really and truly, breathing has such wide-reaching effects on our body, on our physical performance, how we think, how we feel. Literally every single human function always goes back to breathing. So I personally, as an athlete, I'm always looking to get the most out of my body and what I am capable of. So naturally, I have a lot of curiosity around the body's functions and how to do those things better. So that is what has led me to Breath. Also, I just think that James Nestor is a really fun author, and he is another person who is a journalist who has stumbled on a fascinating concept, and this is where it's taken him. Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World by Cal Newport. This book argues that the ability to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks is a very valuable and rare skill in the modern information economy. It is essential to mastering complex skills and producing high-quality work. Okay, so I read this book for the first time about 3 years ago, and I came to this book looking for answers/help. I was coming to this realization that I was increasingly having a difficult time focusing. I've suspected for a long time that I'm probably undiagnosed ADD, ADHD, something in that category. But as I've gotten older, it's increasingly gotten difficult to focus deeply on tough and challenging tasks. Specifically, when I'm writing our video series, there's just such a massive amount of information and story and detail that I'm all needing to keep in my brain at once. And it's kind of a daunting process to get into. And I was having a really difficult time focusing for periods long enough so I could really dive into the story and write it to the best of my ability. I was starting to suspect that social media was having some effects on my ability to focus for long periods of time, but I really wanted to get my focus back. And so this is one of the places that I came. I will say some of the tools and techniques that he lays out to help train your sense of focus in this book are techniques I use to this day. And I feel that over time, I have very much learned how to be in more control over my sense of focus. And I've also just come to realize how radically important it is to my process. So I really do recommend this book if you feel that you are struggling with really deep focus. I think that this is a great book to have a physical copy of. I think that this might be one that you want to spend some time taking some notes in the margins and using a highlighter in. I hope it helps too, if you do feel that it's something you need. And the last book in my personal development category is The Creative Act: A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. The Creative Act presents creativity as an accessible spiritual practice, emphasizing that it is innate human capacity to connect with the universe, wellspring of inspiration, and it's not just for the select few. Okay, I will say, if you ever research this book, you will probably find a great deal of very flowery language about this like universal wellspring of information that we can all just tap into. This book really does kind of take a somewhat spiritual approach to the creative practice. And even though I don't personally feel that I need the flowery language, I do find it to be deeply accurate. The reason why I feel like I was so captivated by this book is I have always felt that creativity is more of a way of, quote, being and like thinking and moving through the world, but I never really had intelligent language to articulate that feeling to anyone until I read Rick Rubin's book, and I feel like he has given me language to speak to that. I have also always felt that creativity is not something that is just limited to people who are working in the creative field. I think that creativity is ingenuity. It's new ideas. And I think that anybody who works in any field, who does any certain type of anything, like if you picked out your outfit this morning, that's creativity. Did you figure out what to feed yourself last night for dinner? That's creativity. I personally believe everyone has access to it. And I feel like this book kind of gives you parameters, so to speak, and how to feel like you have better access to creativity and how to take the stigma away from it. I just felt that this book was very beautiful. I do recommend getting a hard copy for this one. It's a beautifully designed book. The cover is stunning. It's very visually pleasing to have it in your bag, to have it out on a coffee table. You're definitely going to want to highlight in the pages some little like folds in the corners and take notes inside of it. It's a gorgeous book, and don't spill coffee on yours like I did. I'm going to flip to a random page in my copy of The Creative Act: A Way of Being. for an inspiring quote. I've highlighted so many pages in this book, so it'll be easy to find one. The person who makes something today isn't the same person who will return to work tomorrow. Fantastic. That is so good. Ooh. All right, moving on. Your one and only honorable mention for the personal development category is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. A Counterintuitive Approach to Living a Good Life by Mark Manson. I feel like if you want a book to just like spew truths at you, but to do it in an aggressive way where they're swearing at you, I don't know. For me personally, that's how information seems to sink in the best. In that case, this is a great book for you. All right, before I let you go, here are my next up books in each of the categories respectively. For the adventure and travel category, Challenger, A True Story of Heroism and Disaster on the Edge of Space by Adam Higginbotham. Natural History and Science, The Song of the Dodo, Island Biogeography in an Age of Extinctions by David Quammen. Personal Development, Wherever You Go, There You Are. Mindfulness, Meditation, and Everyday Life by Jon Kabat-Zinn. If you're looking for more book recommendations that fall into these categories, I actually have a very extensive blog post that I put together after asking our Instagram community if they had any book recommendations. I got like a landslide worth of incredible book options, so I went ahead and distilled all of them into one blog post. There's a ton of incredible books in there, and that's actually where I have been going to reference my next book every time I'm ready for one. So you can find the link to that blog post, as well as all of the books mentioned in today's episode, in the show notes down below. If you personally have any recommendations for additional books that you think that our community would like, obviously, we're all ears, always down for a book recommendation. In fact, put them in every single episode in the comments. We'll take them. So toss your book recommendations in the comment on the episode wherever it is that you are listening. Thank you so much, and we'll see you down the road.